Campfire Chronicles, where the haunting and the mystical come alive through tales shared under the starlit sky. In the military, the campfire, much like the smoke pit, is a sacred space. It's a place where soldiers, veterans, and civilians alike gather to share stories that blur the line between reality and the uncanny. These narratives, filled with humor, horror, and heart, rarely find their place in formal settings. Instead, they are kept alive around the flickering flames of the campfire, a symbol of camaraderie and tradition. Tonight, we bring you 3 stories from the dusty landscapes of the Middle East, each narrated by those who lived through them. They are tales of shadows and whispers, of ancient curses and lost souls. So, sit back, let the warmth of the fire envelop you, and prepare to be transported to a world where the past and present intertwine in the most unexpected ways. My name is Lieutenant Jackson Turner, formerly of the British Army, and this story takes place in the heart of Iraq, during Operation Telek in the early 2000s. Our platoon was stationed in a remote outpost near the ancient city of Uar, tasked with securing a stretch of desert road that was often used by insurgents for smuggling weapons and supplies. The journey to our outpost was a grueling one. The heat was oppressive, and the endless expanse of desert seemed to stretch on forever. Our convoy kicked up clouds of dust as we made our way along the rough, unpaved roads. When we finally arrived, we found a small collection of prefabricated buildings and sandbagged positions, surrounded by a high wall of HESCO barriers. It was a stark and lonely place, isolated from the rest of the world. Setting up the outpost was a Herculean task. We worked tirelessly to fortify our defenses, setting up watchtowers, and digging trenches. The heat was relentless, and tempers flared as exhaustion set in. But we knew that our lives depended on these preparations, and we pushed through the discomfort. One night, as the temperature dropped and the stars emerged, I was on the night watch with Corporal Harris. The desert was eerily quiet, the only sound being the occasional rustle of the wind through the dunes. Around midnight, Harris and I were stationed in the main watchtower, scanning the horizon with our night vision goggles. Suddenly, Harris nudged me and pointed towards a faint figure in the distance. Through the green tint of the goggles, we saw a man walking along the road, seemingly unarmed and unbothered by our presence. "Who the hell is that?" I muttered, lowering my goggles to get a better look. To my astonishment, the figure vanished. I quickly put the goggles back on, and there he was, still walking, oblivious to our watchful eyes. "Are you seeing this, Lieutenant?" Harris whispered, his voice tinged with unease. "I am," I replied, my heart pounding. "Keep an eye on him." We watched for several minutes as the figure continued to walk towards our outpost, disappearing and reappearing with the removal and replacement of our goggles. Finally, he reached the edge of our perimeter and stopped, looking directly at us. Harris and I held our breath, expecting the worst. But then, the figure simply turned and walked back into the desert, fading into the night. We reported the incident to our superior, but it was dismissed as a trick of the light or fatigue-induced hallucination. However, Harris and I knew what we saw, and it haunted us for the remainder of our tour. Months later, during a rare moment of downtime, I sat with one of the local interpreters, a man named Ahmed. Over cups of sweet tea, I recounted the story of the Phantom Watchman. Ahmed listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each passing word. "The road you are guarding," he began, "was once part of an ancient trade route. Many travelers perished along its path, due to bandits, harsh weather, and disease. It is said that their spirits still wander the desert, unable to find peace." His words sent a chill down my spine. The figure we saw that night was no ordinary man. Whether he was a ghost, a mirage, or something else entirely, we never discovered. But the memory of that night lingers, a chilling reminder of the mysteries that lie hidden in the sands of time. As our tour neared its end, the sightings of the Phantom Watchman became more frequent. Other soldiers reported seeing him as well, always at the same time, around midnight. One night, as I sat in the watchtower alone, I saw him again. This time, he was closer, and his features were more distinct. He was an older man, dressed in tattered robes, with a long, unkempt beard. His eyes, though hollow and empty, seemed to bore into my soul. I watched in stunned silence as he approached the base of the watchtower. He raised a hand, as if to wave, and then disappeared. The next morning, I found a small, ancient coin at the base of the watchtower. It was worn and weathered, but the markings were still visible. I kept it as a reminder of that night and the mysteries of the desert. The road we guarded was more than just a strategic location, it was a link to the past, a place where the spirits of the dead still walked. Whether they sought peace, justice, or simply to be remembered, we never knew. But their presence was a constant reminder that the desert holds many secrets, and not all of them are meant to be understood. My name is Ahmed, a former interpreter for the U.S. Marines during their deployment in Afghanistan. This story takes place in the arid expanses of Helmand Province, where I accompanied a squad on a routine patrol to a small village near an ancient oasis. The journey to the village was treacherous, with narrow, winding paths and the ever-present threat of IEDs. The Marines were on high alert, their eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. As we neared the village, we were met by the village elder, a wise and weathered man named Hakim. Hakim welcomed us with a mixture of caution and curiosity. He offered us food and water, and we sat down to discuss our mission. The villagers relied on the oasis for their water supply, and any disruption could be catastrophic for them. Hakim warned us not to disturb the oasis, but our mission required us to search the area for hidden weapons caches. Despite Hakim's warnings, the Marines set up camp near the oasis. The location was ideal from a tactical standpoint, providing a clear view of the surrounding area. As night fell, the full moon cast an eerie glow over the water, and strange things began to happen. Equipment malfunctioned, radios emitted static, and a palpable sense of dread filled the air. The Marines, hardened by years of combat, were visibly unsettled. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing stories of similar experiences in other parts of the country. Around midnight, I was awoken by the sound of whispers. At first, I thought it was the wind, but as I strained to listen, I realized it was a chorus of voices speaking in an ancient dialect. I stepped outside my tent and saw several Marines gathered near the edge of the oasis, their faces pale with fear. One of them, Private Miller, claimed to have seen a figure in the water, beckoning him. Others reported feeling an invisible hand brushing against them or hearing their names whispered in the darkness. The sense of unease grew, and I knew we had to leave. The next morning, I approached Hakim and pleaded with him to lift the curse. He listened carefully, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of wisdom and sorrow. Hakim explained that the oasis was protected by a jinn, a powerful spirit bound to guard the waters. He told us that many years ago, a group of invaders had tried to take control of the oasis. The jinn, angered by their disrespect, cursed them, and they vanished without a trace. Since then, anyone who disrespected the oasis or its guardian would face a similar fate. Hakim agreed to perform a ritual to appease the jinn, but only if we promised never to return. The Marines, now believers in the supernatural, readily agreed. That evening, as the sun set and the shadows lengthened, Hakim led us to the edge of the oasis. He chanted ancient prayers and made offerings of incense and flowers. The air grew thick with the scent of smoke and the sound of chanting, and a sense of calm washed over us. As the ritual concluded, I glanced at the water and saw a faint figure standing at the edge, watching us. Whether it was the guardian spirit or my imagination, I couldn't tell. But I knew one thing for certain: some places are best left undisturbed, their mysteries hidden in the shadows of history. The next morning, we packed up and left the village. The sense of dread had lifted, replaced by a newfound respect for the land and its mysteries. As we drove away, I looked back at the oasis one last time and saw Hakim standing there, his hand raised in farewell. We never returned to that village, but the memory of our time there stayed with us. The Marines, tough and skeptical as they were, had experienced something beyond their understanding. And for me, it was a reminder of the power of ancient traditions and the unseen forces that shape our world. The Cursed Oasis was more than just a source of water. It was a sacred place, guarded by a spirit bound by ancient laws. In our quest to complete our mission, we had come face to face with forces beyond our comprehension. And in doing so, we had gained a deeper appreciation for the land and its mysteries. My name is Dr. Emily Carter, a former combat medic with the U.S. Army. This story takes place in a field hospital on the outskirts of Baghdad, during the height of the Iraq War. The hospital was set up in an old, abandoned building that had once served as a school. It was a sprawling complex with long corridors, empty classrooms, and a makeshift operating theater. Despite its dilapidated state, it was our only option for treating the constant stream of wounded soldiers and civilians. From the moment we arrived, there was an oppressive atmosphere that hung over the place. Nurses reported hearing children's laughter echoing through the hallways at night, and some claimed to see shadowy figures darting around corners. One night, as I was performing surgery on a critically wounded soldier, the lights began to flicker. At first, I thought it was a power outage, but then I saw a figure standing at the edge of the operating room, watching us. It was a young girl, no older than 10, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Who are you?" I whispered, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I tried to focus on the surgery, but my hands were trembling. Afterwards, I asked the nurses if they had seen the girl, but they looked at me with pity and concern, attributing it to stress and exhaustion. However, over the next few weeks, more sightings were reported. Patients claimed to see her standing at their bedside, and some even said she spoke to them, offering comfort in their final moments. Determined to uncover the truth, I began investigating the hospital's history. I learned from the janitor that the school had been bombed years ago, during the early days of the conflict, and many children had perished. The hospital was built on the ruins of their classroom. One evening, I decided to investigate further. I followed the sounds of laughter and whispers to a locked room at the end of a long corridor. With the help of the janitor, I forced the door open and stepped inside. The room was empty, save for an old, dusty desk and a few broken chairs. But on the wall, I found a faded photograph of a class of children, their faces beaming with innocence. Among them was the girl I had seen, standing at the center, her eyes filled with the same sorrow. From that day on, I made a point to honor the memory of those lost children. I left small offerings of flowers and toys in the room, hoping to bring them some peace. The sightings gradually ceased, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted, but the memory of that young girl and her sorrowful eyes stayed with me. As our deployment continued, the hospital became a place of both healing and mystery. One night, as I was making my rounds, I saw the young girl again. She stood at the end of the corridor, her eyes meeting mine. This time, she smiled, a sad but grateful smile, and then she vanished. The next morning, I found a small, handmade doll at the foot of my bed. It was old and worn, but it had been placed there with care. I took it as a sign that the spirits of the children had found some measure of peace. The haunted hospital was more than just a place of suffering and loss, it was a testament to the enduring spirit of those who had perished within its walls. By acknowledging their presence and honoring their memory, we had helped to heal the wounds of the past. And in doing so, we had come to understand that some mysteries are best left unsolved, their secrets known only to the shadows. These stories are but a few of the countless tales that emerge from the shadows of war. They remind us that even in the most hostile environments, there are mysteries that transcend our understanding. Whether they are the result of ancient curses, restless spirits, or the psychological toll of conflict, they offer a glimpse into the unseen world that exists alongside our own. As you leave the warmth of the campfire and return to the safety of your homes, remember these stories and the people who live them. For in the telling and retelling of these tales, we keep the memories alive and honor those who have walked the thin line between reality and the supernatural. Good night, and may your dreams be free of shadows.